It's the intelligence. There are moments where intelligence and sensitivity, you can't tell them apart. And that's what really makes great artists, that you have method and feeling at the same time. And in Rohmer, you always have the sense that people enjoy talking and they're smart and they know how to talk and it's not boring. It's interesting. Those are words from author André Aciman on Éric Rohmer's 1996 Conte d'été, or A Summer's Tale. Seeing Faces in Movies is a podcast where each month I focus on the works of a different director or cinematographer, and each week I invite a guest on to discuss a film and the artist's filmography. I'm your host, Felicia, and today we're talking about A Summer's Tale. So quick synopsis of the film is, a graduate takes a holiday before starting his first job. He hopes his sort of girlfriend will join him, but soon strikes up a friendship with another girl working in town. She in turn introduces him to a further young lady who fancies him. Thus begins the triangle. The film stars Melville Poupeau as Gaspar, Amanda Langlet as Margot, Gwenelle Simon as Suzanne, Aurélia Nolin as Lena. It's written by Éric Rohmer, cinematography by Diane Maratier, directed by Éric Rohmer, edited by Marie-Stéphane, music by Philippe Edel and Sebastien Erms. Today my guest is Nathan Cowles. I know Nathan from the Royal Film Club, and I know that you and I have very similar taste in film, but sometimes living one also we don't agree. But before we get into all that and your background into film, just want to say thank you so much, Nathan, for coming on. It's been a long time coming, so I'm very excited.
Of course, yes, I'm very excited to get going this one. This is gonna be I've been a fan of this show for a long time, so I'm very happy to be a guest on here. This is great.
It's gonna be a good time. Before we get into the Rohmer film that we're talking about today, A Summer's Tale, I'd love to hear more about how you started watching films on a more quote unquote serious level and what got you into watching them and making them too.
Yeah, it's like every, I think, kid, however you want to call, like high school child, high school male kid, a lot of it definitely stemmed from like me trying to go out, find more mainstream or more popular avant-garde art house films, however you want to call it. But that also just kind of led me down the road to, like, for a long time, my favorite movies were like Clockwork Orange, Eraserhead, Inglorious Basterds sort of thing. So it was kind of like delving towards that path. And then I think just that was around maybe 15, 16 is when I started to take films a little bit more seriously, because I was exposed to those films, but then I was kind of taking down that separate path of going deeper into other filmographies, other films. I remember Funny Games being like a big turning point, and discovering Michel Haneke, that was huge. And like other like big ones, like I discovered Bergman, I discovered Fellini, and like, your more somewhat popular art house filmmakers. And then just through time, I think everything's just kind of traversed in a way where I'm just slowly exploring so much more. And with the power of like Criterion streaming services and having such easy accessibility for films, it just kind of ended up being, I kind of want to watch this movie, I'll discover it. Oh, these are similar. I like this director, I want to go down, explore this filmography. And so kind of starting at that surface level, I'm kind of at where I'm currently now, which is just in a film binge where I'm just trying to discover things from all walks of life. Yeah, no, it's my favorite art form, obviously. So just kind of slowly realizing that through time, having that relationship early on in life where it's just more of it's something I enjoy, to something that I can, like, having it develop into something that I find such artistic merit in has just been a very interesting experience. It kind of just boils down to a lot of the same stuff that I think a lot of high school kids kind of go through, which is I like the disturbing stuff. Oh, I want to see this. This sounds so messed up, and then just being like, oh yeah, there's actually a deeper meaning to this, and I kind of suck. So maybe I should fix that.
No, I mean, I definitely got into watching films other than like growing up with two parents who are really big movie heads, but through watching horror films and just wanting to go back and find the older stuff. And then that branches off to being like, oh, there's this other older stuff. And then now I don't watch as much horror as I definitely used to, but there's always some sort of gateway. So there's no shame in that. But I am interested, if you want to, talk about how you started creating your own films.
It started out just with friends in like fourth, third grade or whatever it was, and we would just make stuff. We have like a local park, and we would just all go out and shoot stuff. It was very fun. Eventually, those friends either kind of left or we parted ways or whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
right now, I have my own little clique of people who I'm very good friends with, who are just down to shoot with me, down to make stuff. But I think it started to develop around end of I mean, like during high school, I had my film class, so it was very easy to just shoot things every single day. Granted, they were not being taken very, like, we weren't taking them very seriously for the most part. A lot of it was like very
Mm-hmm.
skit oriented or just like shit posting, however you want to call it, where we're just kind of playing it for laughs. And then I think during
Mm-hmm.
the COVID years, when like senior year hit and we kind of all went to a very weird stage where we kind of took stuff a little bit more seriously. We all started kind of like, finding a little bit more of our voices and discovering what we really wanted to make. And then that's how I made Obtusion, which is a film with my sister,
Mm-hmm.
and that's gotten slight traction, not huge, but it's fine. But it's been, it was a film that is very personal to me, that was made after about a year after high school. So I was kind of still in that stage of like COVID oriented stuff where we were still kind of trapped in the house. We couldn't really go anywhere, and kind of using film in that way as a mode of closure or therapy
Mm-hmm.
was very important during that time. It felt important to be able to express stuff through an artistic lens rather than just having to outright say it. And that's how I do prefer talking about certain issues that I may be dealing with. It's just something that I tend to gravitate towards. I mean, I'm still making stuff. I'm not like the most optimistic in terms of it being like a career, because I have to, take into consideration finances, and I have to take in consideration the cutthroat business that is the film industry. But I would
Yeah.
obviously, I still want to, I enjoy making stuff. I enjoy writing stuff. It's a very pleasant time when I get to shoot with my friends. Every single time that we film is it creates such nice memories. And then the final product, no matter even like if we're not necessarily keen on sharing it with everybody, it's still something
Mm-hmm.
that we value and we preserve. And that's kind of how I've been treating it for the most part, just as a vessel to create moments with my clique and my friends and with my family, and to express stuff that I want to express without having to write little notes app pages and posting them or anything like that. I don't want to like
Yeah.
outright
That's
say that. I
simple.
want to be yeah, exactly like that. But
I mean, I think that's a super healthy way of expressing yourself. Most people don't have the ability to do that, so I think it's really cool that you've gone down that avenue, even if it's just for yourself. But like, you've also done a lot more than most people have, especially at your age.
thank you.
So you have a lot to be proud of for sure. That leads me to Romer in a sort of way. I don't even know that I knew that you liked Romer. I just kind of felt the vibe that you would vibe with him. So I was like, let me gauge and ask you, and was super pumped that you said yes. So you chose A Summer's Tale. I'm wondering if you recall the first time you watched it and what your thoughts were on that initial watch.
Funny enough, when you sent me the list, I was originally going to do My Night at Mods, because I was like, this is probably the one I
Mm-hmm.
had the closest relation to. And I was going to be like, oh, yeah, let's do that one. And then you sent me the list and I saw it was already chosen. I was like, oh, cool. Okay, I'll use my backup, the Green Ray. And I was like, oh, wait, no, that was already
Yeah.
chosen too. I can't use
Yeah.
that one. So I was like, okay, I don't want to talk about Suzanne's career because I didn't really have the most
Mm-hmm.
best time with it. So I was like, you know what? Okay, I need to just pull one out of the hat. And I saw you liked A Summer's Tale, and I was like, you know what? I haven't seen it. Let's just go with that. I'm going to trust Felicia
Oh,
on this one,
nice.
and we're going to go with it. And then I was like, okay, well, if I hate watching this, I'm going to feel so bad. But I watched it like immediately the night that I sent you. I was like, hey, Summer's Tale, let's do this one. And I watched it that night. I was like, ah, shit, this is my favorite Romer. Okay, thank God.
Yeah.
I'm so
Okay,
happy.
good.
Yeah, it was yeah, that exact night. I was actually terrified. I was like, oh God, I really hope I don't find it like mediocre. I'm like, oh God, please let me have something interesting to say about it. And I do. Oh my God, it's phenomenal. It's so good.
Mm-hmm.
I really, all of the aspects that I appreciated about like from My Night at Mods and the Green Ray really, really translate into this and actually develop so much more, I think, into this. And obviously, we'll get into it later. But
Hmm.
yeah, it was a little stressful because I really
Yep.
wanted to make sure that I picked a good one. But I think understanding like the people who I know who really do like it, and then like your opinion, like being I saw like your 5-star review being like, oh my God, this is like absolutely incredible. It's like, okay, I have a feeling this is going to be good. I'm just really hoping that I have something interesting. And yeah,
No, that's cool. It's not often some people do pick the movie that we're going to talk about and it's like their first watch, but it's rarer, so I think it's brave to do that. I'm also kind of hoping someday someone does pick a movie that they don't love just to see. I figured this would be a hit. I figured that you would find something to talk about because this one's yeah, we'll get into it, but it's very, very interesting for sure. Again, but before we get into it, one last question. What got you into Romer? What was the first film you watched, and how did you become interested in his work?
yeah, it was My Night at Mods, which was the film club pick. And I
Mm,
had known about Romer, but the other thing was I'm still in my personal like taste. I'm not the hugest French wave fan. I appreciate kind of what it is
mm,
and what it
okay.
symbolizes, but a lot of the films, especially like I remember watching Breathless for the first time and I had to try and do it in like 3 sittings because I was like, I can't do this. It's like I appreciate the craft of
Very
what's
fair.
going on. I just don't get I don't get much personal enjoyment out of it. And there are definitely like exceptions to it. I enjoy a lot of Varda's work, and I think she's kind of like would be that big one that I kind of gravitated towards for a little bit. But when it was a French wave pick, and I really didn't know too much about Romer, I was kind of skeptical about it. And then I watched it, and it was just so much different to what I was expecting. It was not jump cut, jump cut, jump cut. It was actually very nuanced. It was very sweeping in its camera movements, and it had such a different style to where my preconceived idea of what a French wave film was just pretty much like it collapsed on impact. I was just like, oh wait, okay, this can also be a French wave film, which without having to go to that excessive amount, it could be utilizing
Hmm.
those technical aspects in a way that I find just so much more interesting. And that's kind of where I gravitated towards from that. And then you accompany that with the dialogue, and I really just I fell in love with that film. And then as kind of like time progressed, I watched the Green Ray, which I do enjoy, not as much as My Night at Mods. I know that's like a fan
Hmm.
favorite, but I do prefer Mods a little bit more. But I was kind of just like, with the idea of what Romer was, I was kind of like going into it like, oh, okay, yeah, okay. I'm much more on tune with what he's doing than with what other French New Wave filmmakers are doing. And that's kind of where my relationship with him is pretty much solidified as kind of like one of my more favorite directors to come out of
Hmm.
that era. Plus, he's just like one of the coolest guys from his like he has such an
Yeah.
interesting background, which I don't know how much of it we'll get into, but like his life with the not owning a car, not having his
Hmm.
mom,
Yeah.
not knowing he was a film director, and like all these like I was like, damn, this guy's so interesting. I want to watch and see what he's doing. Yeah, that's kind of where my relationship.
No, we'll definitely get into that because especially with this movie being like the most personal one out of his filmography for sure. But it's really interesting to me that Romer is not more known. Like he is known within the film community, but he's not more attached to the new wave because he was making films like relevant films much longer than some of the others. Varda was still doing, but like someone like Will Truffaut was gone by this time, but Godard
Yeah,
is doing whatever he's doing. But this is 96 and it doesn't feel like a 96. It feels very fresh. So,
it does incredibly.
I mean, we can get into it. I guess, like I said, I was reading that this is his most personal one, which is interesting if he relates to this character. I've always found the way he writes men very interesting because they're not likable, but they're very honest. I don't think they're not ever like bad people. They're just very real. And him putting himself in this character without explicitly saying it, but I guess people who knew him was like, oh no, this is him. And how you watch this character who just kind of shows up to a town hoping for the best, but really just messing things up for himself along the way because he is more self-centered than he's willing to admit, essentially. Again, not a bad guy, just bad decisions. As he said, things don't happen for him. I'm wondering how as you've read a bit about Romer's life and this character, watching it, how you feel about the way he created this man and how it's interesting that he has three women interested in him. It never feels too obnoxious, though, at least for me. It just feels like you could see why they would gravitate and you could see why they would move away. How do you feel about Romer's life and as it relates to this character's journey within the couple months he's there?
Yeah, because I think the most, at least prominent theme that's kind of being expressed is the idea of prioritizing art over human
Hmm.
relationships, and that idea of taking precedence over something that you are pretty much putting like your entire focus on. You're not gaining that same natural, I guess just the natural relationships you're gonna get from meeting other people or putting yourself into relationships or taking priorities of making sure that your life is going in order. Like I think Margot, the character, talks about how he has no conviction. Yeah, he's just not taking that aim at. He's not striving
Hmm.
to be that better person. Like he's just kind of letting things come his way and he's going with them, but he's not putting anything back. There's no pushback with him. So kind
Yeah.
of seeing that, hearing about Romer's life prior to it, because I didn't really research it before knowing we were going to do this. So kind of like hearing that he was a very interesting guy, about how he was, again, like the car thing, out he would jog 2 miles to work every single day, and how his mom, like, yeah, his mom had no idea he was a film director until like late. I don't know if she ever found out, or if it was like later on in her life or anything like that. But just the idea of him being such like a real character,
Hmm.
compared to just other directors. It's so interesting seeing him place himself into such a critical place in this film, because when you kind of compare it to something like Suzanne's career, where I actually just despise the main character in every single way. I
Yeah.
hate him so
Yeah.
much. Because the first time I watched this, and I knew kind of prior to it that you, in your review, you were talking about how you wanted to punch the main character in his face
Yeah.
every time he like used his guitar. And I was like, for the first 30-ish minutes, I'm kind of like, I don't really get why Felicia hates him so much. Like he's kind of just a person. And then as time goes on, I'm like, oh wait, okay, yeah, no, fuck this guy. And then on the rewatch, I was like, okay, yeah, no, especially like this guy
Yeah.
sucks. I hate him. And yeah, so kind of like knowing that Romer is like, I relate to them like the most, I guess, because when you look at other male characters in his other movies, they're
Hmm.
really like a little bit more outright dickish,
Yeah.
douchebag, white, rich boys, sort of like that. They're kind of using, he's really playing into that role. With this one, it's there, but it's a little bit more subtly kind of under the covers. That's kind of what he's not necessarily expressing fully outright to you, but he's implying with the conversations and the relationships he's making with these characters. Even the clothing the guy wears, how he's always in black and white and gray, and he's just not expressing
Hmm.
himself through the color like every other woman in this film is. It's interesting seeing him take such a critical lens at himself. Yeah, I think if you're going to critique yourself in a way and you're going to be honest about it, I think it's very respectable. I don't think that
Yeah.
he is as, again, like as much of a dick as somebody like in his like moral tales films, where he's like kind of like
Hmm.
really going at it with these main characters. He's a little bit more earnest with how he's approaching it, which I respect, and still being able to understand his flaws, which is obviously an incredibly respectable aspect for any director. If you're going to
Hmm.
really hone in on your flaws and your negative aspects, and then translate them into a film, so that you're kind of allowing people who you're showing this film to kind of see that real self, your personal side. I think that showing that personal side is one of the most important parts of the film. And then, as you just said, it's one of his most personal films, so it makes a lot of sense.
No, I think it's super interesting that, not a lot of people are willing to put themselves out there and be like, yeah, I am not, again, not that he's not a nice person, this guy, but he obviously has his flaws. And to be honest about it, some people would try and soften it, but he doesn't. at all, really. And again, he's nowhere near as bad as a lot of the other men in his other films, but it's interesting. And I've always, like I said, I found it interesting how he writes men because I always felt like he must not love or he must not either love writing men or he doesn't have that much respect for at least the men that he's around or himself because they always come across as like pretty awful personalities to be around, essentially. But the women, he always writes very flat and not in a way that he's putting them up on a pedestal. I think he just maybe he felt more in tuned with women. And I think that's why, because anytime I see pictures of him, it's always like with other women and other women in his cast. So he got along really well with them. And the women in this film, there, three of them are very, very different, but I think they have their pluses and minuses to all of them. But I find it interesting that this film opens up with a lot of quiet air. Like he's just walking around, it's very quiet. And we open up with like, we have like those title cards where it's the days. So we now know that he's only there for a certain amount of time. So we're there in the mindset that we're following this guy for a short amount of time. We're not going to see what happens to him before or after. It's a lot of quietness as he's just kind of exploring the area before Margot talks to him first. And it's kind of weird because this movie has a lot of dialogue, a lot of speaking. So when you think back to when you watch it again, seeing that opening scene, you're like, oh, this is so different from the rest of it. And there's not that many scenes where there's not dialogue being spoken. And I think it sets up this character really well so that you're not right off the bat like apprehensive of him because you could be because you're like, who's this guy going on vacation randomly? How does he afford this house? And then you find out about all these things. You know, he's not one of the rich boys like the other characters in his movies. How do you feel about setting up that story that way? Because I think when you set up a story where this character's on vacation, he's outside of where he normally is, you kind of have the liberty of just having something out of the ordinary happen to them and you don't question it as much. Because, like he says, the situation with the three women has never happened, will probably never happen to him again. But in the sphere of that summer, it makes sense. So, how do you feel about setting up a story that way and allowing that story to develop?
I think it's actually pretty important, especially kind of allowing us to, especially on a rewatch, understand the point that I think he's trying to make across, which is especially like in the editing of it too. Everything is so fast, it's so quick. The day is just going by so
Mm,
quickly. You don't really get a time to, you don't get a point in time where you get to stop and really take into appreciation a lot of the aspects that the place is having to offer. He is just a lonesome walker, essentially just trying to like there's nobody to converse with. There's no relationship being made, not with
mm,
just the town, but with other people of the town. So he's just kind of stuck in this weird area where yeah, like nothing's happening. He's so why would you stay with him for these long periods of time if there's nothing interesting going on? So kind of having these quick edits and these like quick jumps from one place to another. Even his walk from the boat to the house is pretty much just like one, two, three shots, and then you're there because yeah, like why would you stay with him? Because he doesn't have, there's nothing interesting going on with him. There's no real reason for him to take into appreciation what's going on. He's just very much in a very subdued and tranquil state where he's just trying to go about with his day. But again, yeah, without that central interest, without anybody else to create scenarios with, it's a great way to kind of mislead you into what you're about to kind of get into instead of just being it like a oh we're going to do a quick like a very long shot of him walking from the boat all the way to the house. We're going to follow him on his journey. It's very smart in how it approaches it. So I think that it's a yeah, it's just a very clever way on Romer's part in the post-production area to try to especially like envelop you, especially in a rewatch of your preceded expectations and then just completely eradicating them by the time you go ahead and you meet Margot and you go ahead and you get to that second day and things
mm,
start being a lot getting to a lot slower points and you start to really appreciate the cinematography and the landscapes and the people. But yeah, it's a fantastic open. And it, even on the first watch, it drew me in because it's not something I expected from Romer at all. I had not seen this type of like cutting in his later stages, like in his earlier moral stages. You could be like, yeah, there's
mm.
some definitely like there's that French wave influence, but having it in that later stage is just yeah, it's incredibly interesting just kind of seeing him utilize that in a colored, actual like full on, full saturated color world. He's
Yeah.
actually using that style. It's very interesting.
The coloring is beautiful. I definitely want to talk about that later because it's gorgeous, especially with this Criterion release. But I find because we don't often see Gaspar like alone, he's often with people because he needs to be as much as he doesn't like to think he does. When we do get those few moments of him alone, I think it shows the most insight into who he is and how he is very insecure and he wants to be an artist, but probably knows that that's not going to make him money. So he's like, I'll try and do as much as I can while I'm here on vacation before I have to start my job in September. But there's a couple of scenes that specifically, like one where they're at that club and he's standing there alone because he's awkward and he doesn't know how to dance with them. And Margot's looking at him, Suzanne's looking at him, but he's just so kind of inward in himself. And you could see kind of, and the actor is very good. You could see kind of his mind racing where he's like, I don't know what I'm doing here. And he seems like he wants to leave and doesn't want to be there, but is too embarrassed to say that. He probably needs someone else to be like, okay, we're going. And then there's a couple of scenes where he's playing the guitar and you see he's like trying to, but he's not really putting that much effort into it. And he, clearly basically nicked the other person's song for his own sea shanty. And I think it's absolutely hilarious that this character is writing a sea shanty in the 90s. So how do you feel about that, like that introspection? Because we don't get that much time with him alone because he is being led by these women because he needs it.
I think those scenes, especially the nightclub scene, that one when I first watched it was, whew, that was beautiful. That was absolutely incredible. I loved that sequence when I first watched it, and on second watch, I still really loved it. I had a different opinion of Gaspard on the second watch, just knowing
Mm,
kind of how things play out. So kind of that sympathy for the first, like during the first watch, was really not as much there during the second one because of
hmm
again what I know is going to happen. But yeah, the use of close-ups and the when the song shifts and everybody's just quiet, like there's no music going on, but everybody's still dancing. You can just see Gaspar just kind of like swaying back and forth, doing his own little thing. And then the next song
hmm
kind of comes up and then he just pretty much wisps away and just goes into his little separate corner. Yeah, it's great. And it's very interesting because Romer also does like his narration every now and then. I'm so happy he didn't use it there because
hmm
having just you all you need is just that those two shots of him just looking out, a reverse of just kind of like what's happening in the club currently, and then just him back. It speaks so well as to how this character feels about how he talks about groups later on, how he actually might have a better gauge at relationships than he might actually outward speak about.
hmm
I think that there's so much to be said during those introspection scenes, and they are, I wouldn't say they're my favorite parts of the movie, but they are so important to developing how those conversations, how we view those conversations, knowing what he's like alone rather than how these other women perceive him, because they don't get to be with him in that state. They don't really get to see him in that scenario. So I think, yeah, obviously they're very important. I definitely prefer those really heavy dialogue scenes, but
hmm
the damn, yeah, especially God, that nightclub scene just, it's so good. It's ridiculous how good that one is.
Yeah.
Absolutely insane.
I think Romer is really good at shooting sort of like gathering scenes, whether it's like he does a lot of gatherings at like tables where people are speaking. You see it a lot. I guess French people love to gather outside and eat as groups. You've seen in a lot of his movies. But
Yeah, the Green Ray. Yeah, I know that.
yeah, he's done that there and he's done a few like dance scenes like this where it's like young people dancing and it always kind of reminds me of like two movies that I'm sure are influenced by Romer, but like Call Me by Your Name, there's that really famous dance scene in that. And then After Sun also kind of reminded me a lot
Yep.
of Romer stuff. So I don't know if she's influenced by him, but I have to assume that there's some sort of influence there because it definitely got Romer
Yeah.
vibes.
I think Wells also talks about how she enjoys devastating cinema. So I could kind of see her gravitating towards Romer in that sort of way. So that's, I could definitely see the influence.
Hey, I also love devastating cinema, so I relate to that.
Absolutely. Give me all the inject the depression into my
Yeah.
veins. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, same. I want to talk about the women for sure, because they're
Yep.
just as, if not more important in this film.
Incredibly interesting. Yes.
They're so different. And I really felt it on this watch too, how he wrote Lena, we get less of, obviously. But I think we still get a full enough personality from her. And Selene has her own personality. And then Margot, who we see the most. My personal favorite, I feel like she's probably everyone's favorite because she's the one that
She's
people
so
are,
cool.
you know,
She's
she's
cool.
way too good for him. But
Hmm.
if it wasn't for him, he would have just kind of sat in his room that whole summer. She brings him out and just says, live, essentially. And I both love that for her and hate that for her because it just, she caught feelings essentially. But the way the three women interact with him is they're leading the way. They're just like, come on, let's do this. We're gonna go here, let's go here, meet me here. Because he will never initiate anything. He's always just waiting. And we know that from the beginning when he starts talking to Margot about Lena and how he's waiting for her to show up, has no idea if she's going to, when she's going to, but he's like, I can't go to dinner with you at your house because she might call. She obviously never calls. She doesn't, right? So he's always on passive mode and they're not. He requires them. I find that's a lot with a lot of Romer male characters, but it's especially prevalent here. And again, super interesting that this is the character that he relates to the most. How do you read how he wrote these women and their dynamics?
Like you said, Margot is she has so much development and she has such a nice charisma to her that I think even though the other two women definitely do have certain like interesting attributes to them, Margot is just like you could follow her around for the entire movie for like 3 hours. I'd be
Hmm.
like totally engaged with her because she's so well spoken and she has easily, in my opinion, the best dialogue with Gaspard in any way. And I think like yeah, you could definitely talk about her the most. I think the second is Solene, I think is her name, the second
Hmm.
woman. Yeah,
Yeah.
Solene. Even her when she has like those moments of kind of her principles as she called it being like, I don't sleep with somebody on the first date. I'm not going to wait around if you're just going to use me as like a substitute, having these
Hmm.
prioritizations and still being able to feel that confidence that Margot has, but in a separate way, I think is incredibly interesting because you're not painting these women characters as just like women, women, women. They are all kind of like they're strong girl bosses, whatever you want to call them, or they just have like that
Yeah.
strong thing, but there's nothing separating them. Like every single woman in this film has such a distinct and discernible characterization to them that you can't really like they all have similarities if you kind of want to call it that, but they're not the same people. They are entirely their own
Hmm.
person. It's a testament to how Romer really is very, I don't want to say maybe ahead of its time, but also just like very well versed in just writing these women characters and understanding that you don't want to just kind of keep it from a gaze of that male gaze. You want to be sure and expand on that, and you want to find ways to make these women interesting because if they were all just the same, there'd just be no development for Gaspard. There'd be no different developments in the characterization. It would just be a very subdued and kind of bland time. But because everybody's just so different, it's so engaging just seeing these conversations play out. It's incredible. And I think, yeah, like you could say that Gaspard is the driving, like not the driving force, but the main center point. But the women are the driving forces of this. Like you're saying, like they are leading
Hmm.
him. They are allowing these conversations to kind of go about. And if it's not for them kind of creating these scenarios or bringing up these very tough philosophical questions, then there'd be Gaspard would just again like he'd just be in his apartment writing his music, doing nothing, and there'd just be nothing to it. So yeah, the woman characterization on this is phenomenal, and you can kind of say that with like the Green Ray and like My Night at
Hmm.
Maud's too. That the women are those driving forces, but yeah, it is really. prevalent here. It is the main crutch that this film has to rely on, and it really surpasses it in every way.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for someone to be able to write such great dialogue like he does, he has to be a great listener. And I think he's obviously listened to the women in his life and was able to create well-rounded characters who have then he's not just like idealizing them. He's like they do have their flaws of their own and they have their own emotions and they process their emotions very differently. As you said, they're not just, girl bossing it around. They're not just like, I don't care about, my feelings. I can move on. It's like, no, that's not realistic. How he treats them does affect them. They choose to move past it in their own ways, right? Because I think at the end of the day, they know it's not worth it, but it still has an effect on them. And I love Margot. I remember when I first watched this, I was like, she looks familiar and realized she's the lead in Pauline at the Beach, but she was much younger then. She was like a kid-ish, a younger teenager. So it's interesting to have her back now as like, she's not Pauline, but she's older in this and she really kills it. She's the best to look at. I just love her energy and the way she speaks and how she's just so interested in exploring life and she also is like it's funny because she also has a partner that she does have a boyfriend too, but she's doing her own thing. You could say that's the French for you, just being kind of open that way. But I love her character. Love her van that she drives. It's so funny. This old beat up van. I was like, that does not look like it should be going on long trips in any sort of way. But it's hard not to follow Margot. Like I could have watched a Margot film for sure if he had wanted to do a spin-off with her.
Oh
So
yeah, easily. She's great because even she has her own little flaws, like you were kind of saying, like, maybe she does have a boyfriend and maybe she isn't going about certain aspects in the best way, but she somehow is just such a likable character. And
yeah.
I mean, maybe and when you kind of compare it all down, she might have the least flaws of all the characters at that point, but God, even with those like slight flaws, she's just such an interesting and well-rounded character. I absolutely love her. Her character's incredible.
Yeah. There's at some point where she tells him, hey, you are now, you've got three women, because he only in his mind views it as he's in a triangle, but forgetting that Margot's also a part of the equation. And there's like a moment where he kind of smirks and he realizes, oh, yeah, I guess I am in this situation. And it gets to his head for a little bit there. And around that time where he gets confident is when it starts to like dwindle down. And that's when Lena shows up and it just goes downhill from there. And I love kind of the way it plays out for him because it seems like if Romer was lesser of like a writer, it would have come off as kind of like, oh, I got to wrap everything up for this character. But everything plays out like perfectly. Like she says she doesn't want to go. So then he, tries to tell Suzanne, I can't go, but he's too much of a coward to fully say no. So he's like, okay, yeah, fine. And then he's trying to say he'll go with Margot. And then Lena calls him saying, let's go. And he's just saying yes to everyone. And then he gets that phone call about this tape deck. He's like, sweet. And I just think that's absolutely hilarious. 'Cause I think there's not a lot of outwardly funny things in Romer films, but there's a lot of funny moments. And like, this is a funny moment that I think has a great payoff for this character. And it looks like he might come across as though he got off scot-free, but he really didn't because each of these women gave it to him and told him exactly who he is. Margot's, probably was the most really, honest. She essentially calls him a coward, and I think he doesn't fight it because he knows he is. I'm wondering how you
Hmm.
feel about how each of these women treat him in the end when they decide that, oh, I'm actually seeing you now for who you are, and I can't do this.
Yeah, because I mean, I think that of all people, Celine kind of expresses it very well, and how like the scene where they're at the railway and you just see the boats in the background. Again, absolutely
Mhm.
beautiful scene, and we'll talk. I think we'll talk about the cinematography in a little bit, but like
Oh yeah.
I think that scene really really stuck out because as soon as the words come out, he's like, "Oh, I promised another person," and she's like, "Margot's like, no, Irene." I was like, "Oh, jeez, God, you're in such a shit predicament." But the the gall of him to just be like, no, we can go this place and then I'll go over
Yeah,
here, and just being trying to just be such a people pleaser
I know.
while not understanding that these people are people with emotions and that they actually have staying power and they want to be enveloped in this guy's story and they actually want to have meaningful relationships, and just kind of treating them as being like, oh well, hey, I need a second body to accompany onto this island, so like, you can come with me, it's fine. And then I think
Yeah.
that's also kind of played out with like when Margot is saying her whole thing about how she can't, like, why can't she just go as a friend, sort of like that, and how there's the underlying meaning of a lot of what men want to do with women, and that there's just no
Hmm.
room for friendship apparently among, like, there is these underlying intentions of just having like sexual relations or just kind of making moves instead of just trying to develop relationships with people. It's interesting just kind of seeing Margot really point that out. And I think it was Margot. If I'm wrong, I apologize. But I think it was Margot who was saying how kind of backwards that is and how she needs to be considered into this trip, because even if it's not going to be a romantic thing, he did promise her to keep her in
Yeah.
mind. And how he just totally forgot about that when people who he might be a little bit more interested in romantically show up, and he just completely disses and pushes her to the side. It's very heartbreaking. And even on like the first watch, I'm very happy Margot didn't end up with him, because it would just end terribly and she can do so much better. But it's, yeah, kind of like in those certain moments where you understand that, Margot really has that drive to ensure that she's not being taken advantage of, and she's going to be her own person, and that she's going to have her own say with how things happen, that she probably never would end up with Gaspard for the most part. But it's in those choice moments, I think, when they're really pointing out the flaws and sticking it to him in a way that's not like really Romer like writing down a
Hmm.
full page speech about how he's terrible or anything like that. Everything flows incredibly naturally, and it's just how people would talk. This is how people would be pointing out your flaws. This is how somebody, if you're in a relationship or you just know these people and you're showing yourself as you are like this, these are how people would be showing you that you are not perfect. You're not on this high pedestal. You are not on this plane above everybody else. You are actually so much less than what you think. And again, not pushing it in a way where it seems pretentious or
Hmm.
long-winded. It's just very well spoken. Just those points are yeah, incredibly well made. I think that the Celine scene still stands pretty tall above the rest of them, but I think with Irene too. I know we haven't talked a lot about Irene. I want to know, because I think that if you probably got an opinion for a lot of people, she would probably be the least interesting. At least for me, I think. But I don't know how you kind of view Irene in that way. I think that this
Like
is not a
Lena, you
character.
mean?
Oh, Lena. Oh, yeah. Oh my God, Irene.
It's
No,
okay.
Lena. Yes.
Yeah, I was gonna talk about that because she comes in last, right? So we don't spend as much time with her, but we've heard a lot about her. So you already have this vision of who she is in your mind, and it's not necessarily favorable. Not that there's any other reason other than we're hearing stuff about her through him, and the other women just kind of being like, well, she not contacting you, so like forget her. She obviously doesn't care about you. So in our mind, we're like, okay, this woman's either never going to show up or she's going to show up and like make a whole fuss about things, or it's just going to be like a lot. When she does show up, and I love that she shows up and she's just kind of like, yeah, I've been here and or I got here not that long ago and I've just been traveling around. I didn't really have the time or the opportunity to contact you, but I'm here now, so we don't need to talk about that. And I kind of respect that, where she's just like, I'm living my life. And she does get to that point where when he gets upset about her having to cancel on the trip that they were going to do, or she didn't fully cancel, she wants to move it and shorten it because she has other things to do. And she's like, why does everything have to be on your terms? Like, why can't I do things on my own? And that's very fair, right? Like, yes, she did say that she would go, but she's also allowed to have her own life. She doesn't owe anything to him. And I kind of like that she stuck to it. And she was like, and she is flip-flopping a lot, but I think she is just knowing that she can take advantage of it because she doesn't take him seriously. I think she takes him the least seriously out of all of them, and she's known him the longest. So she is just taking advantage of the fact that he will always be there to say yes, but is also like, hey, I don't owe you anything. And they don't owe each other anything either, but he doesn't view it that way. So it's interesting that she shows up, doesn't interact with the other women at all, because Margot and Suzanne do see each other. They know each other a little bit, but Lena doesn't interact with anyone other than Gaspar and her own friends. So it's interesting that she's isolated and she has the least amount of screen time, but a very lasting presence in a sort of way. Still not probably who you think of when you think of this movie. When you think of the women, you're probably thinking more of Margot and Suzanne, but she still has an effect, at least for me. And how you feel.
When I kind of came down to it, I think she's definitely the most flawed of the three, because I think that she has, like, though she's living her own life, like there are definitely, they seem to be the least compatible when they're actually talking about the relationship, which is so funny when Gaspard is saying, this is the woman for me. Like, I may not have that same love, but she is my woman. I'm like, God, you're such a
Yeah.
fucking dick, man. Like, there's so much distance between them, and just kind of having like these conversations where there just seem to be so sweet and lovey, and then immediately the next day, yeah, there's this scene where he's going nuts on her and she's just going crazy, and then like she calls
Mm,
again. She's like, "Oh no, I'm gonna be an angel. You're gonna be great. Like we're gonna be great together." I was like, God, you guys would be a perfect couple, because like you
yeah.
guys just would not work out for each other. But it's so interesting seeing him. Like, I think the line that like really I think shifted on my first watch to where I kind of understood your point of when you were saying you want to like really punch him, is when he was saying, I was just using like Solène for revenge essentially again.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh God, I hate you. Like you suck. And just hearing that, and then hearing how he is also like so quick to flip back and forth and be like, oh no, she's the woman of my dreams. This is incredible. Like she's exactly who I want, to moving on, be like, oh no, we broke up. Like she's not for me. It's not gonna be the same thing. So just seeing that dynamic and seeing like how actually close in relation they are to how they are treating one another, but so distant in the personalities. It's so interesting seeing that dynamic. And I do think like there's definitely aspects to her which, I mean, if I was in like that situation, like yeah, I would obviously be a little bit more frustrated. It's like, we said we were going to go on this trip. Why are we changing
Yeah.
it now? What's happening at this point? But then you also have to take into consideration how he views the relationship, and how he's just viewing it as
Hmm.
like, I only want a girlfriend for the summer. I'm not really looking for anything really special. And just seeing him actually yearn for that
Yeah.
deep emotional connection without feeling like, you can even chalk it up to like a toxic masculinity thing of how he just doesn't want to outright show his emotions. He doesn't want to be like in need of that relationship. He doesn't want to have a he doesn't want to be very outwardly spoken about how he yearns for a close relationship with somebody.
Hmm.
But in actuality, that's what he really needs. But he needs to be, that strong person. He doesn't need anybody. He needs to be on his own. But that's obviously not really doing him well, because as we see in those introspective scenes where he's just, not with anybody, doing his own thing, walking around, those quick edits and those very monotone scenes just kind of show that he is not happy when he's alone, even though he's outwardly saying that he is so much happier when he's not in a group, and that it's so hard for him to just create relationships. But I think in terms of like interestingness, I probably do prefer the other two, but I can definitely see, like, if we're talking the relationship, theirs is just so weird. It's so
Yeah.
interesting seeing it develop and the underlying themes along with it.
I do like the line that you brought up about how he was using Solène as a revenge, because I think it was the same with me. That's where it flips, where I think leading up to that, not that I necessarily felt sorry for him, but you can kind of be like, well, he was just letting things happen to him. He was kind of pushed into things. You could be like, well, Margot pushed him into meeting with Solène, was kind of encouraging him so he would forget Lena, and so on. But then you realize, oh no, he knows what he's doing. It's not like this is just happening. He's fully aware of it. He's just pretending like he had no say in it. And he couldn't help it that he was in love with this other girl and this other girl wants him and also another girl wants him. It's like, no, he's fully aware of what he's doing. He's just trying to play his cards, right? And he's obviously not doing a very good job at it because they all hate him in the end. Well, I don't know that Margot hates him, but I think she's just like, okay, well, see you later, I guess, you know?
And I like how she views people, like when we go and meet the sailor, and how she's interested in people and learning about them from that
Yeah,
perspective. And it almost kind of seems like she's just like, man, I want to study this guy. I just want to see
I think
what
so.
is under that brain.
I
Like
think
it's
it's very
so,
much
yeah.
that.
I think it's such a nice little dynamic between the two. Just kind of seeing
Hmm.
her almost, yeah, just studying him, not even just like trying to, because I think she's the most sophisticated of the two from what we see with the conversations and how she speaks. So I don't really think that she's romantically interested in him very much at all. I think she's just trying to kind of use that as a way to study him, which is
Yeah, that's
good for
interesting.
her
Yeah.
because he's a dick. Yeah, he's an asshole.
Yeah, I could see it being more so like a summer project for her and just being like it's something to do and analyze outside of her work, which is an interesting way to view it for sure. Yeah, I mean, there's just so many great scenes with these women and the way that they're shot too. And it never feels like, we're leering at them. And this leading to the cinematography and like the coloring of this film.
So good, so good.
So his cinematographer, Diane Baratier, is someone he's worked with before. And I haven't seen every Romer film, but I have seen quite a bit at this point. I would still say that this is the best looking one out of all of them. Just the way it's shot, and again, rewatching it, I just couldn't believe and whatever with the Criterion release that they did, because I'm sure they did some sort of restoration on it, even though it's not that old of a film. But if it had been released today, I don't think I would have questioned it at all. I could see it as being like a 90s period piece and released today. It just looks so beautiful. And a woman being the cinematographer allows the camera to look at these women differently, I think. And I think it's a very conscious decision to work with a woman and the way the films that she shot with him look different than the other stuff. The coloring in this is just like gorgeous. I
Good.
could see someone like a Wes Anderson being like, I am absolutely obsessed with this. I'm gonna make this my whole personality. And I love that for him. I love like the soft coloring. It just makes everything so calm and allows you to follow along with these characters without being too distracted by the beauty because it does look gorgeous, but it's not overwhelming. Love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, because it's definitely the movie that has made me want to visit France more than any other movie. And I mean, granted, that has definitely been like, France, obviously, everybody wants to go, but like, geez, God, the ocean looks so nice in this movie. Every
Yeah.
single time it is on screen, it is beautiful. And I think like that the way everything kind of just culminates into this wonderful looking image is just, again, because of that color. If this was a black and white movie, granted the conversation would do a lot of the heavy lifting, but God, it would just not have that same impact whatsoever.
Mm-mm.
Especially with the way that the characters dress, having every single woman pretty much have in this like pretty bright or at least colorful attire, while
Mm-hmm.
Gaspard is in the gray, black, white. He is stuck in that sort of mentality, kind of keeping him in that, again, that transparent, however he calls it, invisible state. Everybody else is very open about showing themselves off to other people, and he's just trying to blend
Mm-hmm.
in. So you kind of have that, and then you have that in relation to the town, which again, it pops. It is a beautiful looking movie from immediately in the boat from that first shot, and then you see the ocean, you see everybody got it. Yeah, it is an opening of like a gate where you're just like, I know what I'm getting into, and I have a feeling I'm gonna love it. There's not really a single aspect of color I dislike in this movie, even in the interior areas where you're not
Mm-hmm.
seeing like as much of the landscape, or you're not seeing as much of the natural elements. There's really just so much attention to detail and like the set design and how everything feels so comfortable, but still is able to pop and still able to have that presence, which it's such a well done choice by Romer. And I forget her name, Diane right? Or Dion, or I don't know
Yeah.
if that's when I'm saying it correctly, but from what I've seen, like the Green Ray was really, really well shot to the point where like every
Hmm.
like especially those certain shots we like, with the Green Ray and the sunsets and everything like
Yeah.
that. And kind of using like having that in mind and then seeing it translated and branched out even more with this movie is exactly what I wanted. Because even in the Green Ray, there are some certain like interior shots where everything still looks nice, but not all of it is as enveloping as in this movie. Like there's not really one I wouldn't like take a still from and like hang up somewhere. Like it is so nice. And I think it also just plays into the themes of the movie and just kind of having this bright world and like understanding that there's beauty to be found in even like smaller towns or throughout other people. And then you have Gaspar who's still in that black and white and gray and just not showing that emotion, not expressing himself, not going outwards to make that conscious decision to make relationships with other people or the world around him. It plays well because you can have beautiful shots and you could have beautiful looking things and not have it mean anything, or you
Yeah.
can use that to your advantage. And God, does it really use it to the advantage in this? It is, yeah, a masterclass of color. And I have, yeah, again, like you said, I haven't seen every Romer film either, but it's going to be tough to beat this one if I go down the path, especially if like the seasons or anything. God, it's going to be hard.
Yeah. They all look beautiful, but I think this is like tops. And this is the one that opens up the season, series that he does, like the 4 films. But this one just looks so much more beautiful. And again, they all look beautiful, but this one is like all the way up here, and the other ones are lower on the scale, but definitely worth a watch. I love the way, like his decision to do color, because he's done both. And like you said, like it wouldn't have had a lasting effect, I don't think, had this not had that color in this film, because I think it's plays a huge part in it. And just even the blocking in this movie and
So
the way specifically with the women, because I don't often remember a lot of the stuff with like with Gaspar and how he's sitting somewhere, even well a couple of times when he's on his own, but it's usually like the way he's shooting the women when they're on their own, and he's talking to them off screen. But there's one with Margot kind of just lying in the field and she's talking to him and she looks gorgeous. But so then in that scene where she's essentially kind of like the breakup scene by the boats in the background and like that statue around, she looks great. And then there's a scene with Lena where she's just sitting on a rock on her own. And it just looks like could be from, a Vanity Fair magazine shoot. Like it's just
mhm.
gorgeous. And then they're short enough moments, but those decisions to have them in those kind of relaxed states, I think, shows that they're ultimately in charge as much as he likes to think he is, but it allows them to be in charge. So I love his decision on how he shoots these women, because I think it's really important and telling on how he views them, because I don't think he's ever
Yeah.
looking down on these women for getting into this situation, in quotes, with this man. At least that's how I read it.
Yeah, because I mean, I think one thing that really stood out too is like even the first scene where you're kind of meeting Margot for the first time, they have their walk, and then you have the tracking shot, and they're walking forwards, and then instead of keeping that two shot, as soon as Margot kind of goes deeper into who she is and like where she's coming from,
Hmm.
you're doing that close up, and you're keeping that attention solely on her. And yeah, you're kind of insinuating that, again, she has all that power in that scene, but the intention is like you want to know more about her life. You want to know more about who she is and what she's doing here and how she got here and everything like that. And you're giving her that respect that you actually need for this character to feel like an actual person. If you went ahead and kept in that two shot and you just kind of had her explaining her background, it would not have that same impact. It would just feel like, oh, okay, well, we're still talking. This is just small talk. Like, this is just how they're going to get to know each other. But because you chose to really hone in on her, it helped shape her character in a great way that allows the audience member to really respect her and to really get a better understanding of who she is as an individual rather than just a character. Like you actually really get to envelop yourself in her, and that's yeah, it's very respectable. It's something that a lot of people, especially male directors, just don't do. A lot of male directors would kind of go ahead and just decide to keep it in that two shot, or to kind of just focus on other aspects. But because you are respectable towards your women characters, not only does it help ensure that you don't look like a dick from that like the side of the directing side, but it's going to add another level to your storytelling, which is incredibly important, especially for a dialogue heavy movie like this.
I definitely agree with all that. And it takes a lot of talent, but also ability to listen and gauge human beings. Because I feel like not all people, and it goes both ways. Some people might not be good at writing men, some people might not be good at writing women, but just understanding, the needs of both and having respect for both. Because I think he respects both equally in my mind. One of the last things I wanted to bring up before I pass it on to you and see if there's anything we haven't covered was, and this is a kind of a short note, but like the music that runs throughout this, there's not that much of a like music other than what they're playing or singing, but there's the song, the shanty at the beginning, near the beginning, where they have the guy kind of sing a bit and then Gaspar creating his own song and he has Suzanne sing it. And that scene is interesting because it goes on for longer than I guess most scenes would. And especially in this film, that's not just speaking, they're going through the song. And you're like, okay, I remember just thinking, oh, so I guess he has written a full song. It wasn't just those few little lines he was practicing. But then when they go on the trip with the family on the boat, they're singing it again. And like all of them. And I just found that really interesting, like a choice, because I think it just leads into more of Gaspar getting a little bit more confidence of being like, oh, people do care about what I'm doing, because I think he doesn't think people care. And it's not that Rohmer saying it's bad that had a little more confidence. I think he's just like, trying to show a different side of him, of that he's able to, accept that he can have, or that he is an artist of some sorts. I don't know how you feel about those two scenes, because I always find them funny. And the song was stuck in my head after for a while, even though I'm like, the song is kind of stupid, but it's an interesting part of the film.
I actually didn't even realize, I think I noticed on my first watch, not as much on my second, that there is not any background music except for the ones that's used in the film, which is something I actually love. I'm actually a big fan of using that. So that was great. That was another plus I just forgot to mention. But I think the idea of using those musical sequences is also important, because it almost, at least in my interpretation, kind of felt like he was still kind of using that as like a self-centered way. Like, yeah, he's kind of using the music as a way to create these relationships, but that's still his main focus. That's kind of all he cares about. And that's why I don't really think many cuts during those music sequences. Like, we're keeping those long shots because if we kind of cut away, it would insinuate that, the focus is no longer with Gaspar and his music. Gaspar's not really thinking about music. In those instances, he's kind of like, distancing himself off. But if you have those scenes where it's just the music and he's kind of looking at it from the perspective of, oh, people like the songs, and maybe, now that people are liking these songs, I can, like you're saying, like they're finding that people care about him a little bit more. But I saw it like more as like a self-centered like gratification for him in some ways, or he just kind of felt like he was like really feeling good about himself and not really taking into consideration the fact that the music can help create relationships, but rather he's just like, oh, people are liking my music. That's great. This is my art. This is all I really care about. That's how I was kind of perceiving it. Even when he's using Celine in the part where like he has the guitar and he's like, oh yeah, use this. I'm like, we can sing this. And he's not really focused on the idea of creating relationship, but more so just focused on the idea of using her as like a vocalist to kind of better gain his own ego. I think the shanty, I liked it. I thought it was fun. Granted, I don't hear a lot of shanties in my everyday, so just kind of hearing, I was like, okay, yeah, this rules. I love this.
Yeah.
But it's fun with the body language of how he kind of just looks at the music. He's not, when they're on the boat and everybody's having that good time, he's just kind of like looking around and just kind of like seeing how everybody's singing and how they're doing it to the music. And yeah, again, just keeping himself centered and not branching out for those relationships. But I think the music is great in the film. It's very simplistically used for a better like underlying meaning. But yeah, if you had a soundtrack or you had a score for this film, I just don't think it would definitely not have that same impact. So yeah, that gets to a pet peeve in like other films, but yeah, it's great. great here.
I think there's just so much going on that you don't really need it, right? So I
Hmm.
think it works for sure.
Yeah, it would feel too like insisting upon itself if it was like
Yeah.
using music. Yeah, it would just be like, oh, hey, feel this, anything like that. And I think Romer's definitely smarter than that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely agree with that for sure. Are there any parts of the story or just the visuals or anything of the film that we haven't discussed that you want to bring up?
I mean, I guess the ending too, of just how he immediately is like quick to just be like, this is gonna work out for me. I don't have to say anything.
I know.
I'm gonna go and do my music, and I'm never coming back. Essentially, it's like, yeah, I'll write to them, and then in the back of your mind, it's like, oh, no, you're not, you dick. You're not gonna write to them. Of course you won't. That scene, the telephone scene, when you just hear everybody's like, I'll meet you at this. I'll meet you at this, and he's like, okay, I need to call Margot, and then he gets his thing. He's like, oh, I changed my mind. I'm very happy now. Yeah, if you kind of didn't have that character journey, you're like, oh yeah, you're happy. I'm happy too. But I'm like, God,
Yeah.
I wanted you to just like fall on your flat on your face. Like
Hmm.
I just wanted you to go away. But I think that was. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. It's like great use of mirrors too. I think there was a great use of mirrors,
Mm.
especially in the cafe. That was great.
Oh yeah.
That's something. I'm. Oh, I guess the last thing, and this is just a line that really irked me from him, is when he's like talking about. He talked about somebody, but he described them as just saying like, "Oh yeah, she's got a great IQ." I don't know why that bugged me for some reason. I really don't know why. I don't know if it was like something where like, yeah, I don't know if it was like something that ticked me off, but it was almost just like great IQ. What the hell does that mean? What are you trying to get
Yeah.
at? And that could be a personal thing, but like I don't know. That ticked me off a little bit.
That sounds exactly like something this character would say though, and everyone else being like, I
Hmm.
don't know what you're referring to, but
Yeah.
sure.
Hmm.
Like, I feel like I know what you're inferring, but it's not good.
The way it came out, oh God, yeah, the way it came out was just so snidey and oh God, it was annoying. But yeah, this thing's awesome. This is such a
Yeah.
good movie. It's ridiculous how good this thing is.
I'm
Absolutely love
glad
it.
that you liked it for sure.
Oh
And we
yeah.
got to talk about it.
Hmm.
So I love that. But we can move into the last segment of the show, which we're still talking
Yeah.
about Romer. We're still talking about the A Summer's Tale, but switching gears a little bit, the last two questions. So I know you've seen a few Romer films at this point. If someone's coming up to you and saying, "Hey, I've heard about Romer, would love to start watching his films, where should I start? What film would you recommend?"
This is a very close contender because I actually think he hits a very good point of like a very good median of accessibility and still like artistic merit to kind of like get
Hmm.
into that middle. But I still think The Green Ray would probably be the most accessible kind of like opening film. It is probably, I think, his most popular. I could be wrong, but I
I
think
think
like
so.
that's the one that everybody, yeah, the one everybody really knows him for. And it's a great movie. I still really enjoy that movie. Granted, not as much as others, but I think that if you're trying to kind of get into it, it has a little bit of everything. It still has the physical, like the philosophical conversations, and it still has the very well written women characters,
Hmm.
especially in this one, having it be like the sole focus of it. And a lot of his camera movements too are still prevalent. And I still think that he expands on this in other ways through other movies and other ways he does it better. But I think if you're trying to start out, I think this would be a there's really I don't think any better jumping point than the
No.
Green Ray.
I mean, I agree. That's my choice too. So, yeah, it's interesting. I think because this would be also, but I could see someone being put off by him and or Gaspar. I mean, and then not wanting to right away watch something else, not realizing that, Gaspar is actually one of the milder men in Romer films. So I think Green Ray is a good way to start, and then you can branch off, and you can watch this one right after if you want. I feel it could be a good
Yeah,
pairing for sure.
yeah, I think if you want to just start with a really big dick character, you just go to Suzanne's career and you're just
Yeah.
like, God, yeah, this is great. I hate everybody. Or the I forget the exact title, the cafe at his short film
Oh
for the
yeah.
moral series. I forget the exact title, but that one, like, you're like, God,
Yeah.
I hate this guy too. If you want to go full like hate men, go on that side. If you want to be more subdued with it, Slater stuff, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. When he mellowed out a little bit. Side note,
Mhm.
actually, have you seen Claire's Knee?
You know what? I actually haven't, and I was planning on watching his entire Moral series before I started this, but I actually got sidetracked with a couple of things. But I do want to see it. I've heard many mixed things on it though. I've
Yeah.
heard a lot of people love it, a lot of people hate it.
I would be very interested to hear what you think about it. It's one I
Yeah,
plan on rewatching because there's a lot going on. I think it was the first Romer. No, that it wasn't the first one I saw, but it's interesting for sure. I think yeah. When you do
yeah.
eventually watch it, I'll look out for your review of it because I'd love to hear what you think.
I've heard many people, even Romer fans, call it like
Mm.
trash. So I'm just
It's beautiful also, but yeah. Okay, second question, last question of the day is the double bill. So if you're pairing A Summer's Tale with another film or films, if you have more than one choice, what double bill are you creating and why are you pairing those movies together?
yeah, I'm doing another French New Wave film from the latter half of it, like their 90s era. And that would be La Belle Nuices, I think, or Nuits.
Okay.
Yeah, by Jacques Rivette.
Yeah.
Because yeah, they are definitely both French New Wave films that are not in that sporadic aspect. They do take their time, especially that one. That one's
Mm.
like I think 4 hours long. It
Yeah.
really takes its time, but not only with the technical elements on how it's presenting everything, but also the underlying intentions of the male gaze and how he is treating the subject and how Rivette is kind of writing the male character in a very critical way. And also the prioritization of art over human life is also prevalent in that movie too, which is definitely in line with A Summer's Tale. And kind of having a Rivette Rohmer double feature, I think if you were going to do any, it would definitely be this one. And Rivette's
Yeah.
somebody who I actually enjoy a little bit more with his French New Wave films than others. And I think La Belle is an absolute masterpiece. I love that movie immensely. But I didn't really know that this film had so much in common with The Summer's Tale until I watched it
Yeah.
and I kind of thought about it for a little bit. I was like, oh damn, yeah, they're kind of like not necessarily going for the exact same intentions, but they have those same critical views and they have those same tones. And a lot of especially the way that they're moving the camera and how they track everything and they move it so fluidly, it's very reminiscent of other Romer films too. So I think it'd probably be that. And then, like, if you're going to go with philosophical conversations, The Fifth Seal was another one, which
Okay.
it's just all philosophy, which
Mm.
I die for philosophical conversations in films. Like this is why Romero is like somebody who I adore because he knows how to write philosophical conversations without them seeming so like heavy-handed or above everybody else. They just seem like people talking. And that's kind of
Hmm.
the same deal with like The Fifth Seal. It's definitely not the same tone-wise, but if you're just looking for something of like a philosophical nature, it would be that. But I think the double billing would definitely be La Belle Nueces by Rivette. That's definitely my
Yeah.
choice for it. But yeah, it is I'd be interested to do that. It would be a long
Yeah.
double feature, but I don't think you've seen that one. Yeah.
No, I haven't. It's been on my list. It's funny that you brought up Yvette because as I was rewatching this, it reminded me a lot of Sid and Judy Go Boating. There's a lot of
Hmm.
like the visuals of even like the interior shots that reminded me of that a lot. So that's interesting. I do think that they're kind of kindred spirits in that way. They're definitely their own version of the new wave versus, the others from before. So I think they definitely
Yeah,
took
Godard.
that. Yeah, I mean, Godard wishes.
Take notes, Godard. Jeez.
He really should have. I have two options, and one is like not tonally the same at all. It's a screwball comedy from the 30s. I just thought of it could be fun to pair it with something tonally different. And not that this is like a super serious movie, but it's not like a laugh out loud comedy. So I thought of Design for Living, which is an Ernst
Oh, okay.
Lubitsch film, and in that it's a woman who is kind of in a love triangle with two men, but she's, again, like the women in this, but a little bit different, more in charge of the situation where she's calling the shots. And it's interesting to see that dynamic in that. And then the other one I thought of is a more modern film called Les Amours Imaginaires. And I think the English title is Heartbeats. It's a Xavier Dolan film. And another love triangle there, but you get a queer love story also involved in it. And there's no way that Xavier Dolan is not a huge fan of Romer, I think, his whole career. And I love him, but his career is very much Romer-esque. And this movie is the most Romer out of all of his stuff. So I think that would be like if you're looking for something you just want to chill and watch a lot of pretty visuals, but with like depth to the story, I think they would be probably the more apt pairing if you're going for that kind of vibe that night.
Yeah, I think Dolan probably loves Romero about as much as he loves kissing boys in his movies.
Yeah.
It's right up there.
Yeah.
Every s- I do need to watch more Dolan. I've only seen Mommy and Tom at the Farm, but Heartbeats has
Oh
been up
yeah.
there for a little
Yeah,
bit.
that's
But
my favorite one of his.
I'll have to see it. I loved Mommy. It was actually my favorite for a long time. It used to be one of my favorite. It's
Yeah.
probably my favorite movie of all time. It used to be. Yeah, it's so weird seeing the because I think he just retired not too long ago too, which
Yeah,
is
I
just
know.
so
It's beyond,
weird.
it's so weird and also depressing. Like I hope that he just, I don't know.
Yeah, don't know what's going on with him. Hope he finds peace wherever he is.
Same,
Can only
same.
hope.
But being super selfish, I'm just like, I'm dying for another movie. But we'll see. Maybe he just needs a break from all the chaos. And then he'll come back with like this huge masterpiece.
It's the just a 4 hour
Yeah.
4 hour long French piece of everything that's culminated. It's gonna make all
Yeah.
of the 30-year-old film school students just lose their minds.
AKA me.
Yeah.
That's literally me. Yeah, that's a perfect way to end this. But that was A Summer's Tale. That was Éric Rohmer. This is the opener for the series. I'm super glad this is opening it because I think this is like perfect way to just get in and dive into his work, what he is offering and what he does best because it's definitely one of his best ones. So Nathan, I'm super grateful you picked it, super happy that you loved it, and beyond happy that you came and chat with me about it.
Of course, I'm just very sorry you're not gonna be able to top this with the
I know.
Romer films. You have to talk about stuff that's just not as good.
I'm just gonna put this
But
episode 4 times for the month. Just gonna
just talk.
cancel the
Oh
other
yeah,
ones.
every week we'll just talk about A Summer's Tale. We'll just have new things to say about it.
Yeah.
It'll be great.
I mean, you could
Only
for
go from
sure.
there.
Well, thanks again.
Of course, no worries. I look forward to hearing the rest of the episodes too. I'll be watching for those. I'll be looking out for them.
Ouais, c'est ça. Je suis une fille.
Seeing Faces in Movies is an official podcast of the Royal Film Club. It's hosted and edited by Felicia Maroney with intro music by Lamar Walker. If you like what you heard, let us know at seeingfacesinmovies.com or send us an email at seeingfacesinmovies@gmail.com. And while you're at it, please subscribe and rate the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. And stay tuned for our next episode on The Green Ray.